Welcome back, everybody. This is Parker Hurley. This is day 3 of the offseason, so we're on to the third NFL team in the NFL draft order, which is the Arizona Cardinals. As I'm going through their season review and offseason preview, and I had 5 questions from this is May 2nd when I wrote this article for the Arizona Cardinals. I wrote my 5 questions heading into the season. So remember that this is way back in May. Things have probably changed since then, but we're going to review my questions, answer what happened, whether I was right, wrong, whether my questions were in the correct direction or not. And then we're going to create 5 new questions for the offseason that will hopefully have solved by the end of the NFL draft. So Arizona Cardinals with the third overall pick. My first question entering their season was how improved is the outside pass rush? I talked about how they added Josh Sweat. They should be getting BJ Ojulari healthy. Zaven Collins and Baron Browning were coming on last season, and they're coming back in the same defense. And they added Jordan Burch in the draft. This unit should be better. And the answer actually is that from just the edge rushers, and it's actually disappointing because no, these guys did not take the step that was necessary. But the group had 15 and a half sacks from their edge rushers last year, and they had 17 and a half this year. The issue is that the Cardinals as a team had 41 sacks last year and 30 this year. And also, the Cardinals got 17 and a half sacks from their edge rushers this year, getting 12 sacks from Josh Sweat. And they had 15 and a half sacks. I think their leading sacker was 5 sacks last season. So their leading sacker was 5 sacks last season. All 4 of their edge rushers beyond Sweat combined had 5 sacks this season. So Baron Browning missed a little bit of time, but he was disappointing. Zaven Collins was disappointing. Like I said, basically everyone but Sweat. Jordan Burch you can kind of give off because of a rookie season, and then Ojulari, like I said, I thought he was going to be healthy, but he ended up missing time again due to an offseason injury that was after this was written. So he obviously didn't live up to expectations. But like I said, I think the biggest thing is that 1, Sweat lived up to expectations. 2, Browning and Collins had similar pressures and win rates. They just didn't come home with the sacks. I think a lot of that comes down to the game script, playing from behind, teams running the football on you, having less opportunities, and just being schemed out of those situations that they had last season. So I'm not too disappointed with those guys. And like I said, Birch is a rookie, so you can kind of say, okay, not the best group, but and one of my questions that I get into for the offseason is, what are you going to do with this group when the majority of them are coming back and have contracts that are going to be tough to get out of anyways? So it was definitely disappointing, but I don't know how much of it you put on the actual edge rushers due to, like I said, I think Browning and the other guy, Browning and whatever got they both were pretty good. Zaven Collins were fine, and then Ojulari got hurt, and then Birch is a rookie, so they didn't live up to their expectations. The big issue, in my opinion, is, and my second question is, how is the interior defensive line going to shake out? And I think this was by far the biggest disappointment because I talked about how they added Walter Nolan in round 1, and he only played 6 games this year. He was hurt to start the season, then got hurt to end the season. Is going to head into the offseason with major questions as to what he can do. He was, like I said, a top 20 pick that they were expecting to have significant contributions, and he simply didn't. Calais Campbell, you're wondering if he's even going to play after this season. Looked okay, but he was starting to get a little bit older. Darius Robinson, another first-round pick, just looking like a massive bust. He can hardly get on the field, and when he does, he's too small to play inside, too slow to play outside. He's not bringing much to the table. And then Dalvin Tomlinson pretty much had, a more disappointing year for Dalvin Tomlinson standards. So overall, I think, like I said, the lack of pass rush, the lack of complementary pass rush, and the lack of run defense and the ability for teams to really beat up on this group starts with the interior group, and it starts with all these guys being major disappointments. And it starts with, like I said Robinson has to become that 3 technique instant impact player. Dalvin Tomlinson has to be that 1 technique nose tackle who's stuff in the run. They can slide some of these guys inside, and none of that was happening due to the game script and everything like that. And again, one of my questions is going to be, Campbell is old and probably not going to come back to this team. But, like I said, Robinson's a first round pick. Nolan's a first round pick. They're both on their rookie contracts. You're not going to move on from these guys. You really need them to step up. Dalvin Tomlinson, we'll talk about his contract here in a second. My third question is Cody Simon. I said, can Cody Simon start? I said, I know he's a mid round pick, but I said he has traits that can be instant impact. And I said that Akeem Davis, Gaither, and Mac Wilson aren't guys who can hold down the job for long. And it was correct. Cody Simon ended up starting 9 games. It was somewhat due to injuries, due to Davis Gaither and Mac Wilson, and not necessarily due to, they just can't keep Cody Simon off the field. But Cody Simon finished the season excellent, and not excellent, but for rookie mid-round pick standards, and much better than Mac Wilson and Davis Gaither. And I know the GM's coming back. If I were the head coach, I would probably be looking at him as the top guy, mainly due to his cost control and age. And the fact that he's arguably better than Mac Wilson and Davis Gaither. So I think that made a lot of sense there. My fourth question was that can they get Marvin Harrison involved more? I said he had a decent rookie season, 1.63 yards per route run. It's just not what we were expecting from a top 5 pick. Can he end up being that guy? Because with Zay Jones, I don't see him stepping up, and Michael Wilson hasn't been able to step up either. Obviously, I was somewhat wrong about Michael Wilson stepping up, although it seemed like whenever and what's so interesting is that Marvin Harrison went from 1.63 yards per route run as a rookie to 1.58 yards per route run in his second year. So obviously, they could not get him involved more, and he was a massive disappointment in his second season in comparison to his first season. And he missed some time this year as well. He was looking better without Kyler Murray. But the biggest thing is that Michael Wilson stepped up in his place, took over and had 1,000 yards, but a lot of Michael Wilson's production came without Marvin Harrison, and Wilson actually ended up with 1.59 yards per route run, which is worse than Marvin Harrison's rookie season, and it's because Wilson was running so many empty routes when they were trying to get the ball to Marvin Harrison. So it's going to be so interesting, and it's going to be, you think about this team, and one of the things that I kind of am going to talk about here is that they were 2-2, and they lost to the 49ers and Seahawks, a road game, be it, to the 49ers, and then had a home game against the Seahawks that was competitive. And so they're 2-2 with a couple competitive division losses, and they were beating the Tennessee Titans 21-3 to get to 3-2, and potentially just go on to like a 9-win season, a 9 or 10-win season, and just everything awful that could have happened against the Tennessee Titans. Their season completely derailed and fell apart. They lost a 21-3 lead to one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they won one game from that point forward. They lost a lot of one-score games from that point, and it similarly reminds you of the Chicago Bears last year with Matt Eberflus and the Commanders in the Hail Mary game, and I think it was going to be 4-3 and not 3-2. Or 4-2. I think they were 3-2 and we're going to go to 4-2, and instead went to 3-3. And either way, then they just won one more game to finish the end of the season. They just couldn't get themselves together. They fired Eberflus, and then obviously you see that they're in the playoffs now because it's not like the roster was awful. A lot of people thought that they could be a 9-win team last season. And it's just whether, like I said, they were 2-2. It was saying, are we going to be that 9-win team again? And then they just fell off the rails because just belief in the leader fell apart. And it seems very similar with Jonathan Gannon in this part. So if you look at the Cardinals, you say Marvin Harrison and Michael Wilson, if we can get them going with a guy like Trey McBride, all of a sudden it's a better group than you think. So my fifth question here was running back the offensive line smart. I said they didn't make any changes to the offensive line. They didn't make any upgrades at all. They're hoping that continuity is going to be the thing. I said they have at least 3 questions along their interior. I think their center played out okay, but both Evan Brown and Will Hernandez, whether it be injuries or benchings, and I thought both of them as veterans didn't step up. And then some of the young guys weren't ready for it. And then Jonah Williams missed some time at right tackle. So I think they probably should have just did more along the offensive line and not just assumed that their average offensive line last season in 2024 was going to repeat and be better in 2025. So I think I was correct about that one, that they should have probably put a little more into their offensive line. So moving on to this year and some of their questions, my biggest question, number one, is going to be, do they trade Kyler Murray? They benched him about halfway through the season. He's had 2 season-ending injuries, if you consider this a season-ending injury, 2 season-ending injuries in the past 3 years. they could trade him and save about 30 something million dollars on the salary cap. And he's only 29 years old, so he could actually get something back because they've paid out the majority of his contract. The team acquiring him is going to acquire him on a 2-year deal that's somewhat reasonable for the team acquiring him. So they actually could get something back for him. That the question is, if you're the Cardinals, is you're sitting at 3. You don't know who the quarterbacks are that are going to fall to you. You don't know how you're going to, if you trade Murray, how are you going to get another quarterback? You don't right now know who your head coach is going to be. And then, so you have this roster that, like I said, you thought was going to win 9 games last season. You lost a bunch of close games this season. You're expecting, like I keep saying with some of this talent, that if you have just health and solid quarterback play and a stable head coach, maybe you are taking this from a 3-win team to instantly winning, 7 or 8, 9 games. Do you want to get rid of Kyler Murray and reset that clock and reset a lot of players' timelines? I think trading Kyler Murray brings up a lot of questions into these, how can this team that has, some aging veterans, that has some players, entering their prime, that has that Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison, that's great for, you could plop any quarterback into that, but if you have a good quarterback and then you have those pieces, like I said, you're just a few odds and ends away from really turning this thing around. So really interesting discussion. I think they're going to trade Kyler Murray just because it seemed like it's played out its course there, and it's just time for them to hit the reset button. And they're picking so high that maybe they can figure it out at quarterback. But going to be really interesting. Jacoby Brissett's on such a good contract. I see it hard for them to get rid of him. One of my other big questions is that I think they're going to cut James Conner. He's due $10 million. They can save about 8 getting rid of him. He's 31. He just had a season-ending injury. The team, the head coach coming in is going to be a new head coach. The issue that I have is just, who's going to play running back for the Cardinals. I don't think Trey Benson has proven anything in his 2 seasons, but I think they're just a team that could probably add a running back at some point, whether it be even, cheap. And then I think, what's going to be so interesting is that this team was set up to be a multiple tight end team. They lost Tip Raymond like early into the season. They tried to put, Kelvin Beachum as an extra tight end because they were just using him as a blocking tight end anyways. But nonetheless, this personnel is suited for, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison, and then McBride in the blocking tight end, Raymond. Do they continue to do that with their new offensive system? Raymond is a specific piece. Everyone wants a blocking tight end. But when you look at their other receivers, Jalen Brook, Andre Backelly, Xavier Weaver, these guys, like I said, Zay Jones obviously did not step up, and he's a free agent and he's going to be gone. Do they try to upgrade a receiver, and do they say, hey, Marvin Harrison's had 2 years and it hasn't gone well for him. Hey, we need to extend Michael Wilson now. He's in the last year of his salary. So do they add another receiver into that mix? Or like I said, do they just have a complementary third receiver, knowing that they're going to lean heavy into their tight end look? So that's going to be interesting. I think they should cut Evan Brown. That'll be one of my thoughts here. And then Will Hernandez is a free agent anyways. And the question that I have is that also Jonah Williams is a free agent, and I think he'll be gone. So are they going to have 3 new offensive starters, or are they just going out to replace right tackle? And they have John Gaines at left tackle. I think he's entering his 3rd NFL season. Has barely started in his first 2 other than like the last 3 or 4 games for the Cardinals this year. So do they roll with him, John Gaines, and then Isaiah Adams, who was not starting until Will Hernandez got hurt? He was another mid-round draft pick. This will be his 3rd year next year. So 2 guys on rookie salaries, young, have had minimal starting experience. Could you get them in the mix, roll with them next year and see what you have? And then you only need a right tackle. Or does this group come in and say, Paris Johnson and maybe Froholt at center are really all we have moving forward? So I talked about it with the edge rushers. You can't really do anything with them. Ojulari's in the last year of his rookie salary, but Josh Sweat, you just extended him significantly. Zaven's in the last year of his rookie salary, and then Birch, you just extended. So, and Baron Browning's on the last year of his deal too. So you could really, you could trade some of these guys if you don't love, if you're completely changing the way the defense looks. But I almost see it as you just run these 5 guys back. And like I said, you say Zaven Collins and Baron Browning, considering, if we have a lead they should be a little better. And Ojulari should be a little better now that he's healthy. And Birch is in his second year. So I think you just run it back for the most part with them. Calais Campbell is probably going to retire or he'll be gone. They should cut Bilal Nichols to save about $8 million. He was not a significant part. The big question is, do they cut Dalvin Tomlinson? They could save $10 million, but and he's had a disappointing season. He's 32 years old. A new coach may not want that aging veteran. The issue is that if you trade or cut Dalvin Tomlinson, you have Walter Nolan, who's coming off of a season-ending injury and has only played 6 games in his career and has now a history of injuries in the NFL. And then you're pretty much done in interior defensive line. So interior defensive line, despite them drafting it in the first round last year, and despite them drafting Darius Robinson in the first round just a couple years ago, interior defensive line clearly looks like a need, and they will cut Bilal Nichols, and they may cut Dalvin Tomlinson. I also think they should cut Akeem Davis-Gaither and Mac Wilson. I think those are guys that only a specific defensive coordinator like Jonathan Gannon and Rallis, they wanted those guys because they run like a college defense that's really thin and spread out. I don't think many defensive coordinators are going to want those guys. I think Cody Simon is at least a piece that you can build around, and then you kind of just need to add another linebacker there. So moving to their secondary, Sean Murphy-Bunting missed the whole season, and I think they're going to cut him, save a bit of salary, which shows that, they're saving a lot of money. They're going to cut Murphy-Bunting. They're going to cut Bilal Nichols. They're going to cut, Mac Wilson and Davis Gaither. They're going to cut Evan Brown, most likely in all these scenarios. So do they really need to cut a guy like Dalvin Tomlinson, or, like I said, even some of these guys like depth offensive linemen, do they need to cut some of them will be the question. Murphy-Bunting, certainly, because when you look at their starters, I think their cornerback starters are going to be Will Johnson on the outside, Max Melton on the outside, and Garrett Williams in the slot. My question is that Will Johnson had a really up and down rookie season. The highs were pretty high. The lows were really low. There were injuries in between. What does the incoming coach think of that? And then Garrett Williams has had 2 significant injuries in the last 2 seasons. When he's out there, he's excellent and he can man the slot, but they will need to decide. I think it's last year of his deal. So, do you extend him, or they're probably just going to have to let him prove it and maybe have to risk losing him next offseason. And then at safety, they're bringing back Budda Baker. I saw that, he's a trade candidate. If a team, like I said, if you're trading Murray and you're cutting all these guys, and maybe you are just rebuilding and you don't trust Marvin Harrison and all those things, and maybe you are taking a step back with a rookie quarterback, maybe you do trade Budda Baker. You strike while the iron's hot, cut a little bit of salary, move into, 2027. They could have a lot of draft picks and a lot of salary cap and everything like that. But I still think, they're not in that awful of a spot right now. And if they could just get the head coach and everything right, the question is who's going to play next to him. Jalen Thompson's a free agent. He's one of the few free agents on the roster that I could see, regardless of coach, them actually bringing back. So that'll be worth watching. But then they also have Demerson and Katan Crawford, 2 guys they drafted who are on cost control salaries. So if they could just do that and add another day 3 safety, maybe they're just set with Budda Baker's salary and 3 young rookie controlled players. So that leads us into my needs and questions. Quarterback, obviously, it depends on Kyler Murray. Running back, I think they're going to need because of James Conner. Receiver, I talked about. Right tackle for sure. And then linebacker in terms of their defense. And I don't know if they're going to need a safety. So my questions are they going to trade Kyler Murray, and where will they trade him to? Because it still seems like even with the new coaching staff that the ownership and front office has moved on as well. Are they going to cut James Conner? That one seems like a yes. And then I talked about some of the other lower end questions are the 2 starting linebackers, Davis Gaither, Mac Wilson, Evan Brown, Bilal Nichols, and Sean Murphy-Bunting. I think that's 6 guys, veterans, I think they should cut. Do they have 3 new starters on the offensive line at this time in May? I think they have at least 1 at right tackle. The real question is, they have 2 new guard starters. Do they just hope the defensive line gets better? Like I said, is it Dalvin Tomlinson and Walter Nolan, just hoping those 2 get better? And then is it, Zaven and Barron and Josh Sweat on those edges, just hoping those guys kind of get a little bit better, and Ojulari, just hoping they get a little bit better, maybe add some depth along the interior defensive line. But that's kind of like your top 6 or your top 6. And they are on paper. It's hard for them to move off of any of them. So I kind of think their defensive line will be similar when I recheck on this back in the spring. And then, like I said about their secondary, I just wonder what do they think about Garrett Williams? Do they extend him? He's off 2 injuries. Do they like Will Johnson? Do they completely revamp the secondary, even though it looks like it's a decent spot? And that's where I come back to, you could look at this and say, if you're the Cardinals front office and new head coach, you could say, I don't like, we need new offense. We need everything but center and left tackle on the offensive line. I don't trust Marvin Harrison. We're going to need a new running back. We're going to revamp the secondary because Will Johnson hasn't showed toughness. Garrett Williams looks injured. We need 2 new linebackers. I don't like any of these interior defensive linemen. None of them have progressed the way I want them to. Nolan and the 2 first rounders and the edge rushers aren't the style of edge rusher I want. We're just going to redo this whole entire thing. And that's why we're going to trade Murray and we're going to entertain Budda Baker offers. And even Garrett Williams, because of his injury and contract status, will entertain that. Everything like that is possible. Or like I said, you look at it and say, hey, we had a right tackle. We get a cheap running back at the right time. We run this back with better coaching. We lost a bunch of one-score games. We get Marvin Harrison involved, and he's really talented, and who knows what those guys were doing with him. The defensive line, like I said, they have the pieces in place. The secondary is young. There are 2 ways to look at it. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Cardinals do this offseason. So any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, leave them here. I'm Parker Hurley. We'll be back with the 4th overall pick tomorrow.